The truth about apartheid for nearly 5 decades. South Africa lived under one of the harshest systems of racial oppression the modern world has ever known. A system that legalized inequality, normalized cruelty, and stripped millions of their most basic human rights all in the name of race. This was apartheid, and its story is not just about South Africa, it's a lesson for the entire world. It began long before the word apartheid was ever spoken. In 1652, Dutch colonists settled the Cape of Good Hope. Then, in 1795, as Napoleon's wars ravaged Europe, the British seized the opportunity and took control of the colony. What followed was a struggle, not just for land but for control of gold, diamonds and power. By the end of the Second Anglo-Boer War in 1902, the British had won, and in 1910, they united the colonies into the Union of South Africa. But unity was only for a few. That same year, a white-dominated government took power, led by Louis Botha, and in 1913, the Land Act was passed reserving over 90% of the land for whites, while black South Africans were left with just 7%, despite being the majority. It was a calculated system of exclusion. Black South Africans were denied the right to vote, own land, move freely, or access proper education. And in 1948, things got even worse. The National Party, led by Daniel Francois Malan, came to power and introduced the full force of apartheid, a policy of total racial segregation. Under apartheid, racism became law. People were classified by race: white, black, colored or Asian, interracial. Marriages were banned. Relationships between black and white citizens were criminalized. Schools, buses, hospitals, even benches in parks, everything was segregated. Black South Africans had to carry internal passports, known as passbooks, to move through white areas. Without one, you could be arrested on the spot. This system wasn't just humiliating, it was violent. On March 21, 1960, a peaceful protest against the past laws in Sharpeville turned into a massacre. South African police opened fire on unarmed demonstrators. 69 black men and women were killed. Many shot in the back as they tried to flee. The world took notice. South African police opened fire on unarmed demonstrators. 69 black men and women were killed. Many shot in the back as they tried to flee. The world took notice, and the resistance grew louder. But change was far from immediate. In 1976, students in Soweto, just outside Johannesburg, took to the streets to protest being forced to learn, in Afrikaans, the language of their oppressors. What began as a peaceful demonstration ended in bloodshed. Nearly 600 young people were killed, and thousands more arrested. The Soweto Uprising became one of the darkest chapters in South African history. While international outrage grew, one man quietly became the symbol of a growing resistance. His name was Nelson Mandela. Mandela had joined the African National Congress ANC in the 1940s and became a key figure in the fight against apartheid. At first, he believed in peaceful protest, but after the Sharpeville massacre, he realized that the system would not be dismantled by dialogue alone. In 1961, Mandela helped found Umkhonto we Sizwe, the armed wing of the ANC. It was not about terror, it was about sabotage. They targeted infrastructure, not people, but the government labeled him a terrorist anyway. In 1962, Mandela was arrested. 2 years later, he was sentenced to life in prison for sabotage. He would spend 27 years behind bars. But even as the regime tried to silence him, his voice only grew louder. Mandela became the face of a movement, a symbol of dignity, a reminder that justice cannot be buried. Inside the prison walls, he rejected offers of conditional release. The government offered to free him if he denounced violence, but Mandela refused to compromise his mission. Only free men can negotiate, he said. Prisoners cannot enter into contracts. As the 1980s wore on, pressure on South Africa mounted. International sanctions, cultural boycotts, and mass protests swept the globe. Apartheid was becoming a global disgrace, and the South African government knew it couldn't last forever. Finally, on February 11, 1990, Nelson Mandela walked free. He had entered prison as a revolutionary. He emerged as a symbol of peace, but he didn't seek revenge. He didn't call for violence. He called for reconciliation. Together with President Frederick Willem de Klerk, Mandela led South Africa through one of the most remarkable political transitions in modern history. In 1993, both men were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for their efforts, and on April 27, 1994, South Africa held its first democratic election. Every citizen, regardless of race, could vote. Nelson Mandela won. He became the first black president of South Africa, and with his leadership, apartheid officially ended. But Mandela didn't just end a system. He rewrote the story of his country. He showed the world that forgiveness is not weakness, it's strength. That peace is not the absence of struggle, but the triumph of dignity over division. Today, South Africa still grapples with the scars of its past, but it stands as proof that change is real. Change is possible, that even in the face of deep injustice, people can rise, unite, and heal. Apartheid was more than a political system. It was a war on humanity, a war on dignity. But through courage, resistance, and forgiveness, the people of South Africa ended that war. Now, it's our responsibility to keep that truth alive. If this story moved you, don't let it stop here. Share this video. Leave a comment about what Mandela's journey means to you. Subscribe to this channel for more stories that matter, because the truth about apartheid is not just South African high.